Make way for Brady Quinn, Fox Sports College and NFL studio and game analyst. And, of course, the radio host on Fox Sports Radio, Two Pros and a Cup of Joe with LeVar Arrington and Jonas Knox, the show that precedes ours on Fox Sports Radio. Let me start with that, Brady. What do you make of that vote coming up in December and the likelihood that we might not have a 12-team playoff until 2025?
I'm keeping my fingers crossed and praying to the college football gods that we do expand. I think the college football playoff has had a ton of momentum. And we've gotten to a point now where we've seen there's flaws in the process of the 13-person committee picking the 4 teams to play off for it. It's an unlevel comparison between conferences, between schedules, and the likes. So I think we've gotten to a point now where expansion brings intrigue back to college football in the playoff again. It allows brands like Cincinnati, who I don't know if they'll end up making it in the top 4 this year or not. We can have a debate all we want about whether or not they're deserving. But it allows them then the chance to actually make it into a playoff. And let's see what they can do. And let's see if they can make a run. But I think greater than that, Dan, it really allows more parity in college football. Right now, what you're seeing, when you see a 5-star, 4-star recruit and you listen to these commitments, a lot of times they're saying, I want to go to Alabama because I want a chance at going and winning the SEC and winning a national championship. You know, a lot of kids are saying that when they go to some of the top schools, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, you're hearing them say this. And the problem is those guys aren't looking someplace closer to home because they feel like there's just no shot of going and playing in the playoff. You expand this to 12 teams, I think not exactly like March Madness, but you get a team like Gonzaga that was once viewed as a Cinderella story that's now viewed as a powerhouse. And it might take some time to build it to that, but I think it'll help build that narrative for some of those programs and create more parity. So, could it get done in a couple weeks? I hope so. It's not that complicated. We made so many adjustments over last year with COVID. Why not? And you already had a 12-team or playoff proposal that, was being worked on for 2 years by Jack Swarbrick, the athletic director of Notre Dame, and a few other conference commissioners. So it shouldn't be that hard to put it together. It just really comes down to the alignment, where these games are played, and how they go about structuring, I think, the first round of that 12-team playoff.
What's your reaction to this proposed 10-year contract for $90 million for Mel Tucker at Michigan State? And you got the game against Ohio State this weekend where they're 19-point underdogs. You've beaten Michigan twice, but he's only coached, 29 games, 28 games? And now you're going to put him up on par with Nick Saban with what he makes at Alabama? What am I missing here?
Well, did you ever see that movie, The Perfect Storm, with George Clooney? I did, but I honestly can't remember how it ends. I don't think it ends well.
No, it doesn't work out well.
Maybe that's the case here too, because I think this week at Ohio State may end up giving Michigan State the business. And by the way, probably even Penn State after that. Like, they could go on a 2-game skid after announcing this. But it really was the perfect storm. When you think about the track record of Mel Tucker, remember he up and left Colorado after 1 year. And so he's already shown the propensity to do something like that, even though he's only been at Michigan State now for 2 years. So that was probably a concern. You have all these big programs now, LSU in particular, that I think we both know is the one that was probably throwing out some big figures or big numbers at him, trying to lure him back to the SEC where he once was a defensive coordinator. So that plays into the structure of the contract and the value. But you then have, a program that has kind of turned some things around. And so I think they're trying to build off this momentum. They're trying to build off this intrigue into the program. And he's able to strike on it when he's one of the most wanted mans, probably not only in college football. I wouldn't be shocked if there's not a few NFL teams, given his NFL pedigree in the past, that didn't look in on it. So when you give him a deal like this, he's basically saying, like, I'm staying put. You don't have to worry about coming back to me next year, the next year, the next year if there's a job opening. I'm staying put here at Michigan State. It looks like a lot of money. But I do think as you project forward, all these coaches' contracts are only going to go up with the Big Ten TV rights deal coming up soon. I think schools are going to look at other revenue models as well, like professional sports leagues with gambling, to figure out how to capitalize on some of that too. So it always seems like a lot now. I think 5 years down the road, though, you're going to see a lot more coaches who are up in the stratosphere as far as what he's being compensated.
Yeah, they're going to go in and say, I want the Mel Tucker deal. Hey, what are you looking for? Mel Tucker money is what I'm looking at. And how is Lane Kiffin possibly up for the job or be interested or whatever? It's reported that Lane Kiffin is on the short list to take over at the U. What do you?
I mean, he spent some time in South Florida, not too far away up at FAU. And so I think he understands how to recruit that area, whether it's back from his ties at Alabama or even USC when he was probably recruiting more nationally. And so I think it makes sense from that standpoint. They've got to figure out their athletic director first. I would think that'd be your first move before you go hiring your head football coach. Yeah. And they already have Manny Diaz there still. So that's, it gets a little bit tough to talk about when there's already somebody who's in that position right now. But give Lane credit for what he's done. I don't care if it's FAU, who he built up. Like, my wife and I used to go up to the Boca Bowl, which FAU would play in up there, every, December. And we go grab a burger at Shake Shack. We go watch football games. And the transition from what was before to what happened after with Lane Kiffin was dramatic. It was unlike anything I've ever seen at a smaller school. And what he's done at Ole Miss, bringing them back to be competitive, relevant. They're talked about within the SEC. Miami's looking for that. I mean, Florida State, Miami played this past weekend, Dan. Did anyone talk about it? Did anyone care outside of state of Florida?
No.
I mean, it's sad because I grew up and I was like, this was the matchup, like at Ohio State, Michigan, and all these other great rivalries. That was one that you circled because you knew how good both programs were. They've both taken a dip and a decline. I think Miami's desperate to get back to where they need to be. And Lane can bring that sort of buzz in this climate in college football in 2021 back to the U, in my opinion.
Oh, I know Lane Kiffin can do it, and he makes you relevant. He has fun. He's laughed at himself. But I never want to hear a coach complain about the transfer portal ever again. You got these guys leaving after 1 year, 2 years. I just don't just save the words here. Let these kids, if they want to come and go, because if they go to play for a coach, then they should have that opportunity to go and play for another coach that they want to play for. Now they finally have that.
I think where coaches complain about the transfer portal is when other teams are trying to poach players on your current team that aren't playing.
Yeah.
That's where this thing gets tricky. And this is how it works. It's actually pretty simple. They basically have a kid on their roster, contact, who maybe was a high school teammate or played against him in high school. They contact that player, social media, text, what have you, and they start the conversation usually through his high school coach. And they're like, hey, he's not playing. He's pretty unhappy. Can you hit him up? Tell us what you think. And that's kind of the grassroots of what's going on behind the scenes. So when you hear coaches complain about the transfer portal, it's more because in some cases they're making decisions in game that have to do with other teams trying to poach the guys already on their roster that maybe are sitting behind a guy who's going to go to the NFL next year. And they don't want to be patient enough to wait. They don't want to wait on that opportunity. And so I think that's where more of the frustration comes from is you having to recruit transfers, JUCOs, obviously incoming freshmen to your program, but also the guys on your own roster, because especially at talented schools, everyone's trying to poach them.
He's Brady Quinn, Fox Sports College and NFL studio analyst. The big noon kickoff on Fox in Norman. It's Oklahoma and Iowa State. Give me the trap game this weekend, the one that you go, uh-oh. Is there one that stands out for you?
You could have said that about this game, I think, for Oklahoma had they won last week, just with Oklahoma State, there for them next week in Bedlam. That was one that kind of I was thinking of going into it. I don't know. I mean, obviously for Michigan, I think that's the one you're looking at. They're playing Maryland, and they've got Ohio State on the other side. And, Michigan needs to win out. They need a little bit of help. But that's the one that, they can't really look past Maryland. I don't think Maryland's a threat. But in reality, they like to throw the football around a little bit. Raheem Jarrett's one of the better wide receivers in college football. And you never know if you get caught looking ahead or a sleepy environment there in Maryland, and maybe you don't play the game you need to. I mean, it's not like Michigan's offense is the most prolific. They run the football effectively. Cade McNamara has continued to improve throwing the football downfield, in particular last week, in a nice comeback win. But the truth of the matter is they're not Ohio State, and so they can't afford to get behind any team, in my opinion. Otherwise, they kind of run that risk of potentially falling short. So
what about
maybe you look at Michigan like that.
Utah against Oregon. It's not a trap game,
No, because I think it's a trap game in the sense of like Oregon can't afford to lose and still make the playoff.
Yeah.
But, really, no matter who wins, they're still going to see each other in the Pac-12 championship game. So that's the crazy thing about this matchup is Oregon can't afford to lose it. Utah probably still can. And the irony to it, too, is the way they go about picking the Rose Bowl, which is out of the rotation for the semifinal games. Utah has a better chance of losing this week and going to the Rose Bowl than if they happen to beat Oregon and then they go on and play each other in the Pac-12 championship game and lose that game because Oregon's not getting the playoffs. So they would probably be the team that ends up going to the Rose Bowl. So it's a weird scenario, but I don't even know if that's a trap game. I just think it's a tough game to play in Salt Lake versus a good Utah team that's really come around with Cameron Rising at quarterback for them.
Is it fair to compare Mac Jones' rookie season to Tom Brady's?
Well, no. I mean, Tom didn't play his rookie year, right?
Well, his first year playing.
No, I mean, the NFL is at such a different point now, too. I think when you look at the style of offense and, I remember, Charlie Weiss coached me for 2 years. That was his offensive coordinator when Tom first, took over. And they had a great defense. They ran the football well. They mixed in some screens and then downfield shots. They didn't ask him to do a ton. Mac Jones is being asked to do a good amount within the system. The way they spread things out, they're asking him to be very accurate, on time with the football, understanding where he needs to go with the football. I mean, Josh McDaniels really requires that from you within his system. But also, I think it's just the lack of them being able to really create big-time explosive plays, at least stretching the field vertically. So it's a part of what they have, but it's also a part in the product of how the game's play now. It's just more spread out. So I think you look at the efficiency, you look at everything from Mac Jones, and it's incredibly impressive. But it's hard not to think that, maybe Tom Brady would be able to do the same thing. But look, Mac Jones is a more developed player than I think Tom Brady was at that point. He was battling with Drew Henson to get into that spot. They weren't throwing the football around quite as much. I mean, Mac at least had a year to start, and obviously the replacement duty to Tua 2 years ago. And I think that prepared him well for what Josh McDaniels is asking him to do right now.
And I always bring this up with people when they talk about quarterbacks development. Dak Prescott, great quarterback. Mac Jones, great quarterback. We're not quite sure about Justin Fields or Trey Lance. And I said it has to do with the environment you go to, especially early. You want early success for a quarterback. Mahomes goes to a team that was 12-4. Andy Reid, offensive-minded guy. I got Kelsey. I got Tyreek Hill. Okay, you're going to succeed. Dak goes to the best offensive line in football at the time. He's got a 1,500-yard rushing running back. If he goes to Jacksonville, Dak Prescott is not on anybody's radar. Even Mahomes would be a curiosity, but he would still be like, oh, yeah, that guy's, entertaining. That's success, and you know this as well as anybody. You go to a team, and it's not a good situation, whether it's head coach, offensive coordinator, owner, all of the above, and it's hard to succeed with that. But, you faced it.
Yeah, situation and circumstance is paramount. So I think any player's success. We talk about it with first-round quarterbacks because, that's, that we have the most impact on the game. We're the face of the franchise, and that's really where you build all the hype for the draft for. But I don't care what player you're talking about and what system they're in. Kendrick Bourne was looked at, the wide receiver for the New England Patriots, as maybe at best the third option in San Francisco, a special teams player. Now he's contributing in a much bigger way within that system because of the position that Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels in particular are putting him in. So, you put Trevor Lawrence on the New England Patriots, I think he's doing the same thing Mac Jones is doing. Maybe Justin Fields too. I think with the rest of this quarterback class, different story. And that's not to take away from what Mac Jones has done. It's just Mac Jones entered into the best possible scenario for him, his skill set, and what he's being asked to do. And I think there's probably one or two other quarterbacks in his draft class that would have been able to excel to a degree if they were drafted to New England, but that's obviously not the circumstance.
I wish blank would have drafted me.
Oh, man. Now we're going down a slippery slope because I feel like, any team I say I'll be spurring the Browns. I mean, that was my childhood team I rooted for growing up. I mean, well, you go back and you look at like the good teams, like we played against in our division, Pittsburgh or Baltimore. And Baltimore's the one that I was talking to at the time during the draft. And they had that great defense. They had a great running game. And, you would have walked into that not having to necessarily do a ton. And so I didn't get drafted there. It wasn't me. It ended up being Joe Flacco the next year. And he was able to kind of work his way in through that system to eventually go win a Super Bowl. So Baltimore is always the first one that comes to mind because they're the one that I was talking to the entire 22nd pick of the draft back in 2007, trying to get to know them because they were going to take me at 23. So that was always the one I always kind of say, man, I wonder how different things would have been had I got drafted to Baltimore as opposed to Cleveland.
You'd be playing for the Jets this weekend against the Miami Dolphins.
That's right. Because life comes full circle.
Yes,
I would still ended up at some point playing for the Jets, having to go up against the Dolphins in that blitz-heavy defense.
I think you did okay. Okay, I think it worked out okay for you.
I mean, who knows? Then I wouldn't be here with you. And then we couldn't be a part of the.
Joe Flacco would be there. Joe Flacco would be talking to me right now.
Joe Flacco, he would be talking to you. It'd be a different story. Yeah.
Have fun in Norman. Always great to talk to you, Brady. Thank you, buddy. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for having me. It should be fun.
That's Brady Quinn. Big noon kickoff on Fox. They're going to be in Norman, Oklahoma, Iowa State against number 13 Oklahoma.